Good evening, everybody. We are here on this Monday evening to talk about yet another Seattle Seahawks training camp session. This one seems to be a little bit lighter. This one seemed to be a little bit simpler, which makes sense because starting Wednesday, the team is going to be doing their joint practices against the Tennessee Titans before their game coming up this weekend. So they took it a little bit easy today, it feels like, which, sure, I mean, I get it. Those joint practices tend to be very intense and often tend to end in violence. So makes some sense that you'd want to pull back on the reins a little bit on the day before you leave. Honestly, the big news of the day concerned a player who didn't really do anything. Yeah, we were talking a lot about Connor Williams. A lot of the buzz around this particular training camp session was around Connor Williams. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that. We also got some injury updates of good and bad variety. But in terms of like a player did this on this player looks really good doing that, didn't get a lot of that today. So we'll just stick to the basic facts here, and then we'll get out of here. Tomorrow is a day off because the team is traveling to Nashville, and then we're going to see what happens in these joint practices. But if you want a little bit of a write-up on the happenings of today, Greg Bell has this article in the News Tribune. As you can tell by the headline, it's mostly about Connor Williams, but still worth reading regardless. Now, before we get into the news being passed along from the VMAC, I do want to do one thing with the depth chart that I showed on my two previous videos earlier today. As many people noted, I did forget about Lomia. He got lost in the shuffle somewhere. When I was moving around offensive linemen, I forgot about Lomia. He just kind of got left off. I didn't mean to imply I think he's going to get cut. I don't. In fact, I think that he's clearly a better keep over Curtis. So what we're going to do, we're going to bump Curtis down to the practice squad. We're going to put Lomia here, and I understand that Lomia is more of a right guard than a left guard, but I mean, we already have two right guards here, so we'll just put Lomia there. And in order to make room on the practice squad, I think we're going to have to let go of Ty Okada. So that gets us down to 53 on the roster and 16 on the practice squad. So, yes, I do think Lomia makes the team. I just got lost in the shuffle. It happens sometimes, but not necessarily a guarantee. I will say that. There is some universe where he ends up on the practice squad. I feel like he's a good enough prospect to be on a roster. If he's not going to be on our roster, he'll be on somebody else's roster. All right, so now that that's out of the way and I've cleared things up on that one, this is actually what I think the roster will look like. So let's take a look at some notes from camp. So, like I said, most of the news today revolved around Connor Williams. He was there. He was in uniform wearing number 57. So he exists, right? He didn't okey doke us. He didn't back out at the last second to go sign with the Baltimore Ravens. However, he didn't really do anything today. He was physically present on the sideline. Seemed like a very quiet day for him, which, I mean, he just got here, right? And as Greg Bell points out here, 8.5 months ago, this guy tore his ACL. So realistically, he's still not all the way back, and he's going to actually have something to say about that a little bit later in this video. But no real action for Williams yet. We'll get more into the plan with Connor Williams later in this video. But suffice to say that the practicing is going to be a little bit light this first week. Because, like I said, the next practice is the joint practice. You might not want to throw Connor Williams into the deep end like that. There is some good injury news, however. Some very good injury news. We got back over the last day Michael Jackson, Darrell Taylor, Dre'Mont Jones, and Drake Thomas. And Drake Thomas may end up mattering a little bit for reasons I'm going to get into in a moment here, but these are all players that could make the team. It's on the table. Like, I mean, I think Jackson and Dre'Mont certainly will. I think that's pretty much guaranteed, but Taylor has potential to. Drake Thomas, it's a long shot, but it could happen. So, some good injury news here. Jerome Baker remains out, according to Brady Henderson here. So it's not all great, but for the most part, things are starting to fall into place. We've been told that Jerome Baker is not seriously hurt, but it makes sense to baby it because it's a hamstring. Again, if he ends up missing every preseason game, I don't love that, but it is what it is at that point, and you just have to hope he's able to quickly pick up the defense when he does get out there. But most of the injury stuff is good news here. We did pick up a couple new ones, however. And these were two guys who played on Saturday. Maybe the injuries were sustained in practice. It's hard to be sure. But John Radigan with a heel injury and D. Eskridge, undisclosed, unknown, did not practice today. Now, McDonald has already said he doesn't think either injury is serious. But at this point right now, if you're Eskridge, this is probably the final straw. You had the remainder of camp and the last two preseason games to impress people. Hard to impress people if you're hurt. And it does sound like Eskridge will miss a couple more practices. So if there was any lingering doubt about Eskridge's future here in Seattle, it seems like that doubt has been purged. Cannot imagine him making the team because he just isn't doing anything and he's not going to get the chance to do anything now. Radigan, by the way, was one of the better players on a Saturday. So I don't know if he hurt himself on one of his 2 sacks, but hopefully he gets better. I mean, it's kind of important this year, right? We're thin at linebacker. We need Radigan to at least hold it together for the season. But again, McDonald didn't say anything was serious. And in Radigan's case, we kind of know what we have, and we're probably comfortable with that. Eskridge was the one who really got hurt by this. McDonald did talk a little bit about plans for the Saturday preseason game against the Titans. And basically what McDonald indicated is that they're going to really go at it in the I think it's 2 joint practices against the Titans. And full pads, going all out. And then for the actual game, not much from the starters. He basically said you're not going to see very much from the starters in the actual game, which, I mean, I'm going to be a little bit concerned if we don't see any of these guys in the preseason. Like, if we don't see any Jerome Baker or any Geno Smith or any DK Metcalf, I mean, I'm going to be a little bit like, okay, I hope this works, because there are teams. We've seen this before. There are teams out there that do not utilize their starters at all in the preseason. And a lot of the time, those starters come out sleepy for like the first month of the year. So if that ends up happening, then I think it's fair to say that I think it's fair to say that that's a strategy that ended up hurting you. Like, I remember the Chargers back in the day with LaDainian Tomlinson. He'd take all of camp basically and all of preseason off. And for the first month of the year, he'd be sleepwalking, and then he'd get it going. So we'll see how this goes, but it's looking like a pretty, well, I'm not going to say non-eventful, because the backups matter in the preseason a lot. But look for the real action to happen in the days before. More on Connor Williams here. We're going to loop back around to Connor Williams here, because that continues to be the most interesting thing about the Seahawks right now. So McDonald says, according to Dugar here, that they're shooting for Connor Williams to practice before the Browns game, which is our last preseason game. And the goal is for Connor to be ready to play week 1. So what that implies is that Connor Williams is not going to be practicing this week. And that Connor Williams is hoping, basically, it's a goal for him to be ready to play week 1. So Brady Henderson kind of outlines it here as well. He captures the same sentiment. Connor Williams playing in week 1 realistic. He says that is the goal. So it's not a sure thing. It's not a guarantee. But that's what they're aiming for. So we're going to monitor this as it goes forward. I think there is a universe where he's not ready for week 1 and they roll with Oluwatimi for the first game. Again, by the way, he might still be partially recovering from the injury. I think, actually, where did I put it? Yeah. Connor Williams said he felt like he's 95% back to full strength. Sorry, I lost that tweet there for a second. But 95%. So he does feel like there's a 5% gap between what he can be and what he is right now. Worth noting. I know it's just 5%, but given the fact that he's coming off a devastating injury, if he wants to take an extra week to get to that 100%, not going to be terribly upset about that. So worth noting, we may not get Connor quite yet. But seems encouraging nevertheless. A couple little notes as well. Aaron Levine here talks about how McDonald called out Dareke Young, calls him the silent assassin, does the right thing all the time, tough as nails. So singles out praise on Dareke Young, which makes me feel like my suspicion that Dareke Young is going to make this team is more likely. He just adds too much value in other areas beyond just being a receiver. So I feel like Dareke Young is going to make this team, and when I read a quote like this, it just kind of further accentuates the fact that he's adding value in ways that is not readily apparent on one live viewing. And one last note here, again, concerning injuries. Almost all this stuff is injury related because we just didn't get a lot of stuff from the field. Again, it was kind of a chill day. They didn't go at it the way that they typically do. McDonald gave no update, or says no update rather, which is a little bit different, on Abe Lucas or Cam Young. So we're not getting much in the way of forward progress with those two, unfortunately. It's too bad. I wish I had something better to say, but I don't. It looks like that Abe Lucas and Cam Young... I mean, Cam Young, I know people can take or leave, kind of. I think it's a little more important than people are letting on, because Jaron Reed might not be doing nose tackle this year. But Abe Lucas, I mean, that one is starting to become a little bit alarming here, because we were told several times this offseason that he will be ready for week 1. Right now, it doesn't feel like he's going to be. It's just not. And that's a big deficit. Not as big as last year because we have George Fant, but that's a big difference between having Abe Lucas and George Fant out there. All right. That's it. I mean, it's a kind of a smaller day. It's kind of a shorter day for updates. Tomorrow is a travel day, so there won't be any practice at all. And yeah, that'll probably just have to tide us over for a little while here. So I'll see you guys either later tonight on stream or tomorrow. I know the Seahawks posted up a new depth chart. Maybe I'll take a look at that in a video. But yeah, things are going to be quiet for a little bit here in all likelihood. All right, go Hawks. See you guys later.